name's Nick, like Robert said. So it's great to be with you this morning. I'm going to talk about my job. So it's something that I get to do every once in a while. I appreciate any interaction along the way. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or raise a hand, whatever you can do to let me know that you want to ask something. I'm going to open my my presentation here so that you can look at something other than just my face as we talk through this. All right, hopefully you can see my screen now.
Not able to see your screen yet. Oh, there we go.
All right, I tried again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There we go.
Okay. All right, so to set some context, the best thing is I get to skip over talking about myself. So here's a bunch of pictures that said my intro. I've been in maybe a couple fun facts to add in addition to the intro there. I've been in Richmond for about 16 or 17 years now, splitting my time pretty much evenly between the two large organizations here, Capital One and CarMax. So happy to talk about my experiences across both those. And the other thing of note probably is born and raised in Columbia, South Carolina. Both my parents are PhD educators. My dad taught at the University of South Carolina for 30 years. And my mom was overseeing the Education Oversight Committee in South Carolina, which was the school ranking or assessment system that they put in place there. So lots of touch points, connections to the education community. I'm not sure that everybody is familiar with CarMax, and so I'm going to quickly just set context for the work that I do and the company that I get to work for. CarMax is pretty great place to work. It treats its associates very well. But the thing that made it great at the beginning was its desire to disrupt an industry that is not well regarded, and that is used car sales. So I think used car salespeople are about as popular as politicians, maybe some other things in mind. And CarMax had this bold ambition to disrupt this industry by achieving this goal, driving integrity into the automotive industry by being honest and transparent in every interaction. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to go to a CarMax. This is not a sales pitch, but I've been to CarMax stores a couple of times, and you can really feel this, that it is a totally different experience where the differentiator for CarMax is the experience that we provide, the honesty, the transparency that folks feel as they're buying a car. And it's great to work at a company where that is the differentiator, where the differentiator is honesty, integrity, and transparency. The reason I joined CarMax was to add to those differentiators. And I like to think about the additions there that we've been working on over the past decade or so as data and analytics and technology, and AI kind of fits squarely in that area. All right, I just found the chat. So that was surprising, but good. And the good thing about working at CarMax and trying to make data and analytics and technology a differentiator for us is we have a lot of data. We are the #1 used car seller in the country for the past however many years, probably 20 years or so. And so that means that we've interacted with a lot of customers, we've sold a lot of vehicles, we've got a lot of relationships in our CarMax Auto Finance, that number at the bottom. And just a ton of interactions with our customers. And so when my team is thinking about how we can develop solutions to help our customers progress or help our associates answer questions for customers, we have the industry's richest data set to work with, which is a huge advantage. All right, context out of the way. Let's dive into AI. And I thought, again, maybe this is continued context, but within the AI realm, let's level set on some definitions and some things that I think about when I'm thinking about AI and working on AI initiatives with my team. So starting place here, for us, what is AI? And AI, or artificial intelligence, is simply computer systems that can perform tasks that are typically done by humans. I got a couple images, maybe industry adjacent images to kind of bring that to life a little bit. It wasn't that long ago. I mean, I tell this story about trying to visit a friend in college, where the way that I got to her house in Michigan was popping by gas station to gas station, looking at a map on the wall, finding her address in the phone book. And that's how I wound my way to Novi, Michigan. But now, given AI and computers and data, right, we are never lost. And in fact, even more so, like if you're going a way that is somewhat inefficient, a system's calculating behind the scenes and giving you recommendations on a better way to get from point A to point B, which is a pretty crazy amount of technology change in a couple decades, let's say. And all this happening behind the scenes, all of this, like the kind of the sentence on the left, just things that I would have done, but now computers doing jobs for me. Of course, on the bottom right, we're headed this way. They're already there. Self-driving cars, and just even if your car isn't self-driving, all the sensors that exist now to keep you safe, which I'm very appreciative of as the father of a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old. Hopefully this can keep advancing to the point where I don't have to worry about them driving. All right, several different types of AI. We're going to cover these kind of legacy versions of AI, as well as what's new and different in generative AI. So types of AI that you may have heard about previously. Siri, chiming in there for me. Machine learning. This is about pattern recognition. I got my degree in statistics, and that's about pattern recognition too, except recognizing patterns with long form equations and things like that. Machine learning is really about leveraging the vast amounts of data and compute power to achieve the same goal. Writing out one equation to put a price on a car, as in the example here, and using the vast amount of data that we have to recognize the patterns that put that right number on there. Second piece here, natural language processing. This is a more recent advancement, last 20 years or so, probably in this space. And it really focuses on language understanding. So if you've interacted with a chatbot, a lot of that is based on understanding, a computer understanding the phrases, I guess, the prompts that you're typing in, and being able to reference back kind of source material and content and provide answers in an automated fashion. When I reference chatbots, I think about how substandard, I guess, subpar my experiences have been with chatbots to date, though I think Gen AI and a lot of advancements in large language models are going to make that change relatively quickly here going forward. Computer vision is computers to interpret images. At CarMax, I've got a couple pictures here of how we leverage this. We take a lot of photos of cars. If you go to CarMax.com today, there's like 60,000, 50,000 cars in inventory. Each of those cars has dozens of images. And so a ton of content that we're generating for each cars, and we like to sell cars. And so we're bringing new cars onto the website every day. We actually take those pictures manually. We've invested a lot in building out a photo lab, which you can see on the left image here. But still, it's an associate going through and clicking images. And as you can see in that picture, that van there is not centered perfectly. There's some reflection issues, things like that. And so we leverage computer vision to kind of automatically improve the image quality and remove distraction. The thing about CarMax here, honesty, transparency, integrity. We want to make sure that customers see the scratches, the dings, the dents in the car, because we're selling a used vehicle. If there are any of those, we want that to be transparent. And so all the image processing is done on the margins. Excuse me. Recommender systems. This one's near and dear to my heart because it's one of the things that my team developed for CarMax. The idea here is, how can we leverage customer click information, the intent that customers are demonstrating online, and use that to make a improved customer experience. All right. So here it's again about doing jobs for our customers where 50,000 cars in inventory is a lot to sift through. And so what we're trying to do is surface the right cars for the right customers at the right time. The last one, also in the AI space, robotics and automation. Here it's about automating work that humans do, which is not necessarily like a calculation, but it's a business process. So an example here, just automatically processing invoices that are low dollar amounts with low likelihood of being an issue. Any questions so far?
Nick, there haven't been any that have come up in the chat, but I wanted to talk about that. You said that your team had worked on one of these projects, and that was something that we talked about when we first met, was like where you started with the company and now how big your team is. I don't know if maybe you want to touch on that at this point.
Sure, I can do that. So I joined CarMax about 8.5 years ago. CarMax at the time had a team of about 80 or 100 analysts, business analysts, strategy analysts that were analyzing business performance, trying to figure out what was happening with the business and why that was happening. There was a small contingent there that was working on machine learning algorithms, but when I was hired in, I was hired as data scientist number one, the first of the job family. Since joining, basically the process that we've taken to kind of grow the team there has been to identify a part of the company where there is a problem that we're trying to solve or a decision that we're trying to make. And then the goal of the team would be to identify the information that could be useful in that decision and see how we could package that information up into the best way for helping out. So like for recommendations. At first, when you land on CarMax.com, before my team got there, you would search maybe for a Honda Civic or maybe just search for cars in Richmond, Virginia. And your search results would be presented alphabetically. Well, we know that's not the most optimal way. A lot of customers only look at the top 10 or 20 cars or so. And the more work we ask our customers to do, the more likely it is that they go to a different website for shopping. And so our team identified that as an opportunity, built out a proof of concept where we started to recommend vehicles based on the cars that were most likely to be purchased in general. And then we worked to personalize that. And then through that, received investments to kind of improve the analytic footprint, the systems that we were leveraging to build these systems, and to hire the talent that we needed to keep progressing. And so that's just an example of one of the use cases. Over the course of the 8 years, we've built out a couple of different teams that focus on different parts of the customer journey. At this point, we have about 20 or 25 data scientists and 20 or 25 data engineers, which are building the pipes to move data, to deploy analytic solutions like this recommender system, which is basically personalizing recommendations for customers in less than 200 milliseconds. So pretty rapid turnaround of information and processing. But that's where we are today. I think we'll, Gen AI presents, as we get into that content, presents some questions about how we want to continue to grow that or adjust resources internally as, the use cases for Gen AI kind of overlap with use cases that we've been working on already. Thanks for the question. And be brave. If you have other questions, fire away. All right. Generative AI is new and different in some ways. And new, I mean, like teams have been working on these for years. It's just new in the sense that companies are really starting to invest heavily in this. Students, I guess, are starting to invest heavily in this as well. And I would just contrast On the prior slide, we had a lot of what is kind of summed up as narrow AI, which is, you take a picture of a car or a complex set of data, and you put that into a system that is designed to do one thing, like center this car in the image, or make a prediction about the right price to put on a vehicle. And so really complex systems that are built in a narrow way to optimize a certain task. Generative AI is what's referred to as general AI, which is really what enables it to be generative, right? You, instead of putting a picture of a car, some complex data in the system, you say car, or make me a picture of a car. And generative AI will interpret that information and go create new things. And this is an AI image of a vehicle. If I didn't like this one, I could say make 100 other ones. And in a few seconds, it would pop out 100 different ones. And then I could ask it to write an article about the car that it produced, and it would write an article. So pretty crazy stuff. The new aspects of it we think about in two areas. The first one is in the name itself, the fact that it's generative, that it has this ability to create new content from a prompt. And then the second one, which is why it's probably interesting in schools and interesting in a lot of businesses, is that it is accessible. Meaning, instead of having a degree in statistics, a cloud analytic environment, lots of data, a complex business problem to spur some investigation. Like you don't need any of that. You just need a web browser, and you can go and access this generative AI, which is pretty cool and pretty scary probably as well in some ways. There are components of that generative AI models that I thought would just be good to set context, and maybe you already are familiar with this, but first is the is the corpus, which is the knowledge base behind Gen AI. If you're familiar with the ChatGPT models, the corpus is like everything on the interwebs, which is impressive, but also there's a lot of not trusted information on the internet. The second is the large language model. This is like the math, the system that understands the relevance of information. And then the last component here are the prompts, or the way that we actually access or engage with the Gen AI. I knew that I wanted to get lots of questions, and so I created this slide for this presentation, which was me engaging with ChatGPT and asking, hey, what questions should I ask in a presentation on AI and Gen AI? And I cut out a lot of the back and forth here. It gave me a list of 8 questions. And I couldn't fit 8 questions on the slide. And so I asked it to pare down to 5 questions, and it spit out the 5 questions here. So if you want to ask a good question, you can see that these are questions that you could ask. You don't have to ask any of these, but the title of the slide here, Gen AI is not hype. Gen AI adds value to my work today. And I understand that people think that there is a hype curve around the value that it's going to add. But I think it's pretty crazy that it adds value in my life today with very little understanding of it, very little training. I'm not an expert in it by any stretch of the imagination. But I know in my personal and professional life, it has added value. And I can give you examples of that. You could ask that question. But I think it's important to understand that this thing is being used today. There are risks, though, that are inherent with the use of Gen AI. I've got a couple of them here. The first one is accuracy. This kind of stands in the way of it being helpful, the fact that it can spit out inaccurate information. And we've done some testing internally at CarMax where we leverage Gen AI to equip engineers, developers, coders, basically at CarMax with a Gen AI solution to help with their coding. It's called Copilot. It's GitHub. I mean, this is not a CarMax thing. You can do research on it if you want. But GitHub Copilot, the idea is I've used something similar. I want to build a model in a coding language. I don't know how to do so. And so I ask a Gen AI tool to write code to do some task, and it'll spit out some code. Or I can put in some code that I've written and it'll improve it. I can put in an error message and it will help with the error message. What we found, though, was that our best developers, our best coders received some real benefits from using Gen AI. And some of the coders that needed the most help, that were the least experienced, actually didn't get any improvement from Gen AI. And I think this accuracy piece plays a big role in that, where even on my prior example, like I'm able to read through those questions and understand, are those relevant questions? Would I want to ask that question? Is that going to make sense in the context of the talk here? And maybe some of those questions I don't even touch on any of that material. Still fine to ask, but maybe not as relevant as Gen AI thinks when it spit out those answers. And so I think the idea there is Gen AI is really helpful for me, but I've got intuition, I've got knowledge on how to use it, I've got an ability to provide human oversight so that I make sure that the answers that I get back are useful for me. And then I discard the ones that are not useful. The second one here is bias. There are, I think the easy way to kind of frame this up, there are systemic biases that exist in culture, in our societies. Those are certainly captured and embedded in, like in the ChatGPT example, internet content. And those biases are then captured into a generative model that is answering questions for people that are accessing it or providing recommendations, that sort of thing. I like to frame this one up as like, hey, if it was generative AI, ChatGPT, the knowledge base there has a stop date of September, the last one that I'm familiar with, September 2021, which means more recent information, historical events are not able to be spit out or are not captured in the knowledge base or the corpus for ChatGPT. That they're going to update that and move that forward. But that limitation on it not having the latest and greatest information is kind of always going to exist there. And so this bias thing, I always say, oh, what if it was 1964 and the cutoff date for Gen AI was a couple years before that? Like that, some pretty big changes can happen in a relatively short amount of time. And so understanding that bias exists is really important when tapping into Gen AI as well. And really, these risks on, it says risks of AI. That's probably true. It's not just a Gen AI risk. It's an AI risk too. There's an example of, I believe, Amazon that was using AI to automatically review resumes. And there was some bias in the way that it had preference for certain language that was used in the resumes, and preferred language that was more likely to be captured in resumes of men versus women. And so that just preference on the words that people used kind of fed into bias in hiring decisions. Privacy, Gen AI tools, anything that you put into a Gen AI solution is going to be captured by Gen AI because it wants to learn. Especially, you can see this on ChatGPT, where there is a warning that pops up when you open up ChatGPT or OpenAI.com, and it'll say, "Hey, be careful about the information. Don't put personally identifiable information in here from a business perspective. Don't put CarMax intellectual property in there because we don't want our secret sauce to kind of be captured by a solution and then available for everyone to be leveraged." And then the last one here is dependence. This one I think is probably pretty interesting as you think about Gen AI in educational context. And it's pretty interesting for me when I think about Gen AI in a cultural context as well. Just this idea that like what happens as more and more of our our knowledge is not on information, but it's on how to get that information, or a dependence on technology to answer questions, or to just live day-to-day life. And the social part that I mentioned earlier, I just think the impact on creativity. Yes, Gen AI can help with creativity, the 100 cars in a small amount of time, but also it really limits the human aspect, or dehumanizes creativity in many ways.
Nick, along those lines, related to education, I mentioned that part of our mission at Virginia Learns is to help ensure that our schools are more relevant. And I asked my two high schoolers, who I mentioned earlier, what do they see in their schools here in Henrico County? What is being taught about AI? When do they hear about it? And their answers were pretty revealing to me. One said that they read an article last year in an English class just about AI, and taking a communications class this year, they're using a project using AI with Photoshop. And my son, who's in an IT program, said he kind of sort of remembers something being mentioned last year, but he can't remember, and they haven't done anything else with it. And then the last point was, other than that, we're told it's cheating and terrible. Now, thinking about education and the workforce and the pipeline and what our students need to learn to be ready for work, what do you think about what does the next generation need to learn about everything that you've been discussing? How can we better connect what's happening in our schools to where students, young adults, will then be, better employable?
Yeah. Well, I've got a lot of thoughts and reactions to that. I think accuracy and bias in information, it's going back a ways. But aren't there like first party sources or third party sources, something like that, where we're taught about accuracy and bias in the stories that are captured in historical documents? So I think those concepts I believe, are being taught today. Maybe they need to be taught a little bit more deeply, especially in the context of Gen AI. That was my first reaction. My second reaction is, what is new and different about Gen AI? And I think there's probably things where I'm less concerned about Gen AI use, and things where I'm more concerned about Gen AI use. So for example, I think in the CarMax context, I said AI helps do jobs that other folks are needing to be done. And the more efficient, the more that we can help them, the more customers are going to hang around. In the educational context, I think, hey, instead of looking up a definition of a word, if I could just type in the word, or I could ask Gen AI to give me a set of 10 articles to read on a certain subject. Meaning, I think that Gen AI could help make education and learning more efficient. I think making it more efficient could make it more interesting for folks, to remove the mundane task. I think there's a slide that coming up here that'll touch on some of that stuff. So there, in ways, I think that it could actually be a real enabler for learning, and a way to capture the interest of folks. On the flip side, if people are just shortcutting the learning by asking a computer to do all the work and not putting human thought into it, or reviewing it, or learning from it, then I think that is a real concern. Like my team members that are working with AI, I tell them my 9-year-old daughter now can build a model. Like, she can do the things that I went to get a master's degree for, because I can teach her the 3 lines of code to write into Python or R to build a model. And so that's not the hard part anymore. The hard part is building a good model. And that is, I just talk about that as the human decisions that are made in the analytic process or the model build process. And so I still want my team members to leverage the automation capabilities, but they need to still build a great model. And the way that you do that is by actually engaging with the output. And the AI solutions are just in that place an enabler as well, helping with speed, not necessarily removing the need for human intervention. And so in the school context, I can imagine that's challenging because the whole point in the school context is the human intervention part, the fact that students are actually doing things and learning from them. But I don't know, I don't think Gen AI is going anywhere. And I think that, it just maybe changes the way that we structure the materials and the things that we focus on in terms of the in the coursework. But I think I have a couple of next slides that touch on some of those concepts as well. But happy if you have a follow-up on that, or if anybody else has an opinion that they want to weigh in on.
Yeah, there was one question that came into the chat for you, Nick. Basically kind of a statement. My 15-year-old uses Photomath app for help with his trigonometry homework. Photomath is educational technology mobile app owned by Google. It's a computer algebra system with an augmented optical character recognition system designed for use with a smartphone's camera to scan and recognize mathematical equations. The app then displays step-by-step explanations on screen, which I think is kind of an example of what you were just talking about. So if that prompts you to maybe expand on that a little bit about making the model versus a good model. I think what Jennifer is pointing out here is those tools are available. I think that touches on what Robert asked about advice, I guess, for that. How does that connect to like maybe your employees and I think you spoke to the expectation. Is there anything else that you might want to add on that particular topic?
Yeah, I mean, on that one, it's if I'm hearing that correctly, it feels like that's an area where my daughter was doing math homework last night, and she had difficulty. She said she didn't understand the way that the teacher had explained what to do. And so I think the idea of her having another resource to tap into and ask a question on her own terms. I mean, like really Gen AI is taking in her own, it doesn't need the OCR yet to see she's 9. But she's able to ask on her own terms and get some personalized support. And if she has a follow-up question, she's able to engage there. So I think to me, that's an example of where it could be a real a helpful tool for folks who want to learn. But I do think that, there are probably a lot of students who desire to learn some of those subject matter is not extremely high. And therefore they may be leveraging that tool to efficiently get through some work that they don't want to spend some time on. But that, I don't think that that's like a new Gen AI problem. Like that student still is not necessarily taking in the content. They're just maybe getting like if they're able to sneak through the cracks, getting a different grade than they should be getting. In which case, what we have started to talk about is leveraging Gen AI to seek out where Gen AI is being leveraged. Like, hey, I was trying to get an example of this for you guys. So I asked ChatGPT about the questions that I came up with. And I said, hey, was Gen AI used to come up with these questions? And ChatGPT said, no, I was used to come up with those questions. I wrote those, which I thought was interesting and made it so I couldn't make a good example. But again, I think it's just an evolution. And what I want people to do is I want people to learn how to use it. The real risk is that we prevent people from learning how to use it by preventing them from being exposed to it. And then they go to their day-to-day lives and use it all the time. and don't understand the accuracy, the bias, the privacy concerns, those types of things, the risk of dependence, how it adjusts thinking, that type of thing.
Okay, well, I appreciate you speaking now. I'll let you get back to your slide
Yeah.
deck, but I encourage participants to drop those comments or questions in the Q&A. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for us, and I've touched on some of these things in the prior answers, but we think Gen AI is an accessible accelerant to productivity. This quote at the bottom is from McKinsey. Gen AI use cases could deliver a total value of 2.5 to 4.5 trillion per year. That is to the world economy. That's the GDP of the UK. They're saying Gen AI is going to add on top of the world economy each year. And where is that accelerant to productivity going to come from? Well, it's going to remove time spent on mundane tasks and increase focus on, in the work setting, value add activities that are more engaging for associates, shortened learning curve. So we hire new folks all the time and need to teach them CarMax policies and procedures, and Gen AI can be an accelerant to that. Improved decision making. We can go have access to way more information than we would normally use in a decision. Like my example of asking Gen AI to go find me 10 articles to read on a subject that maybe have different points of view. Well, it could do that for me. And it could help me with my decision making. Or the coding example, augmented capabilities, where I don't even know how to code anymore, but it helped me build a model by filling in all the gaps that I had. And we at CarMax and in business, there's really a spectrum. This is kind of a near-term view, but really a spectrum of where we see value being added, from extracting information, just kind of summarizing content, transforming information, taking a knowledge base, if you will, and summarizing that, presenting it in an easy to engage with format that maybe is phrased the way that a consumer wants to engage with that. Changing the tone of an article from all business to more fun to read, or vice versa, or just all the way to creating new content. And then I thought about, in like a academic setting, some examples here. So lecture summarization. These are on the positive sides, I think, of how Gen AI can help. So, hey, let's say I'm giving a lecture and I've got maybe as a teacher, I would like to provide lecture notes afterwards. Well, I could do that because I could have a transcription captured of the lecture that I gave, and I could ask Gen AI to kind of summarize that transcription. In this example, it gave me kind of a long form summary. I asked it to summarize into a set of bullet points. We've had this plugged into a meeting where we asked Gen AI to summarize the action items and to assign next steps to the people that were involved in that meeting. So that's the summarization and the synthesis. In the middle, knowledge management. I thought, man, teachers spend a lot of time grading assignments. What if they didn't have to spend any of that time grading assignments? And they could spend all of that time instead on less mundane, more value-add activities in their space. And I think there's a big opportunity there. Material creation. This, you can't read it here, but I asked ChatGPT to create a list of test questions on generative AI. And it says, the first question, what is generative AI and how does it differ from other forms of artificial intelligence? Well, that was in the lecture today, right? And so that's a relevant question based on what we came up with, or based on the conversation today. So I think these, just along the spectrum that I kind of framed up, examples where Gen AI could be really beneficial in the workplace of education. And the last slide that I have here, and then open it up to whatever other questions you have. This is this is not going away. This is gonna evolve really rapidly, and tools or limitations that exist today, hey, I can't even imagine the pace of change. A freshman in high school versus where things are going to be when they're a senior and graduating into college. Like that pace of change is going to be astronomical over the next 4 years. On the left side of the slide here, it's user adoption of different websites, or Netflix, I guess, is a different example. But how many days did it take to get to 1 million users? And ChatGPT was like 3 or 4 days. And it was the quickest, I think, to get to 100 million users as well. So lots of folks are accessing it. They actually said that there was a decrease in ChatGPT usage in June and July because students were home from college. And so they felt that on the ChatGPT servers that less folks were actually engaging. But rapid adoption, I talk to interns and college students that are coming into CarMax, and I have to have a specific conversation with them about, hey, I know that you are using ChatGPT in your daily life, but CarMax information is very sensitive, so be careful what you use it for on the job. At the same time, we're working really quickly to develop tools so that they can use it on the job with our information protected, because we feel like it's going to be that valuable. And then on the right side of the slide here, this is probably very dated today. It's a couple weeks old. This is a view of the landscape of Gen AI applications. These are all the companies that, with a Gen AI backdrop or solution behind the scenes, are developing ways that customers or students, employees can tap into these to solve whatever problem that they're trying to solve. And this is, like I said, ever growing. So I think what I said earlier probably just sums it up, that by the time my daughter, she's 9, by the time she's in high school, the world's going to be totally different on this page. And a lot of the accuracy and bias and all those things, it'll be a different space where I think those limitations will be maybe better controlled, or those risks are better controlled. Accessibility is going to continue to increase, though, as is the customization for very specific tasks. All right, that's what I had. What other questions do y'all have?
Yeah, good stuff, Nick. I've got a question that just came in. Do you have any resources to share that we can use to help alleviate concerns that faculty have about embracing AI in their classes, to help students know how to use AI ethically and effectively?
That's a great question. That goal is what I would love to help with. That goal, I don't have any resources off the top of my mind, but that's my desire as well, that we really we don't shy away from it, but we lean into it. And we need to think about ways that we educate our folks, not just on how to engage with it, but the risks, the pace of change, because I do think a risk that we see as a business is we may try something in a GPT system that works. The next GPT system comes out and it doesn't work anymore because of a complete rewrite of the model. And so that pace of change and the need to evolve as the systems evolve is something that we need to educate on as well. But no, I'll think about and find some resources, and if I can pass them along, if I do find them, I'll pass them along. But that's I guess that's the challenge that I see. So good question.
Thank you. Excellent. Any other questions from anybody? Any other participants? Got one here. So with the example of CarMax, use cases and successes are measured by efficiency, productivity, profit, etc. In education, we have been using products such as written essays or projects to assign a grade. Do we need to change how we assess the learning process or redefine what we should be teaching in the first place? Love that. Well,
feels like my answer shouldn't be, oh, whatever you're doing today is all wrong. So that's not going to be my answer. I'm going to go back to my example, though, of an analyst on my team that's building a model and the thing that I'm trying to assess. So I am no longer as interested in assessing, is this model good? Is it accurate at predicting what it needs to predict? because that is not an assessment of the person who built the model and their competence or the value that they bring to the table. And so I have to take my questions a layer deeper and understand how they got to that model. What was the process that they went through? How did they interpret the information? How they personally influence the answer? And why did they influence the answer in that way? And they better have a good answer for both of those things. So I think it's like, oh, if it's just an algorithm that's spit out and there was no human intervention there, then I've got a pretty poor assessment of the analyst on my team. But if that analyst can talk about, hey, and the first one came out and it looked like this and performed this way, and I actually opened the hood and understood what was going on there and made this change, and it performed a little better, or it performed worse, but I think it's gonna, I think it's more intuitive. It's a better fit for the business. It's going to hold up over time. And so maybe that's my answer, is it's not, it's not, I used to, in math, people, math tests, you have to show your work, how you got there. I think it's a show your work thing. And maybe it's a different way to show your work. I hated the show your work thing. But ultimately, in the context of that question, now I totally understand it. And I think it's a show your work thing. Yeah, I see this other question on how do employees prove their return on investment as employees to their employers. This one's really interesting. I think it's evolving. With the interns and when I have conversations with associates about the use of ChatGPT, my team members, I oftentimes say, like, it's going to be really obvious, not in a negative way, but it's going to be really obvious at the end of the year who was using ChatGPT and who wasn't in their job, because they're going to be more productive. They will have gotten more done. And I say not a negative way, because if the answers are right and it's moving the business in the right direction, the source isn't necessarily as important. The throughput, the ability to make outcomes happen with the information is really important. And so I think, that was my kind of risk that I saw, is that employees that are slow adopters, that aren't using it to help with their coding, or aren't using it to draft an email or to write an agenda for a meeting, not like all the hard decisions that I was talking about in the prior, but removing the mundane tasks. One of the best things that Gen AI does is give you a starting place. Like, sometimes it's really hard to get started. Draft a legal memo on blah, 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 right? In 2 seconds, you have a starting place. Write an agenda for this presentation, right? I'm not saying I did that, but I thought about doing that, and I could have had a starting place. So I think it's a good question. It's evolving. What we will see is more productivity. We won't know exactly how it got there. And so I think it'll be, it's the reason why we want to develop tools so that all associates can access it in a safe, responsible way. And so we can start to encourage people to use it for the ways that are really going to enable them to be more productive. Yeah, ethical guidelines are adopted to embrace AI. If the productivity is enhanced by AI, then what ethical guidelines are adopted to embrace AI? Well, the whole reason that we developed, and it's a CarMax answer, and I'll try to answer more generally as well, but CarMax developed the AI Center of Excellence primarily for responsible adoption of AI. Like, we wanted to make sure that we knew we had legal representation, info security representation, representation from analyst community, so that we knew where Gen AI solutions were being developed. Were they going to be customer or associate facing? What was the knowledge base that it was going to be leveraging? What human review and oversight was going to be performed? ChatGPT says that you shouldn't take the information directly and use it. It says that you should have human review and oversight. Our agreements with Microsoft say the same thing, that, hey, if you're using Gen AI on Microsoft, like, you have to have some sort of human review and oversight because of the risks that are inherent. And so that I think is the answer is like, I think there are always risk on accuracy and bias and excuse me, and good or bad ethics. What AI does is it codifies it, right? It systematizes it. And so the risks that were there and maybe happening at an individual level are now in a structural way kind of built in. And the only way to really prevent that from happening is with human oversight and review. And it's the same thing that happened on the bank side when I was working at Capital One. Highly regulated industry. You're building models to determine whether someone should get access to credit or not. And there are federal laws about information that you can and cannot use, prohibited bases that you can't use when you're making lending decisions. Race, national origin, marital status, on and on and on, right? And it's in that setting, there's something that's called, well, I can't remember the terminology, but there is an intentional impact and there is an unintentional impact, right? You could build national origin directly into your model, or you could build something that's correlated with national origin in your model, and that be an unintended outcome that's negative and discriminatory. And so we had regulatory review, we had legal review. We had to explain and justify every input in our model to a federal regulator. So having that experience is really great. When we think about, expanding the use of AI at CarMax, there's different decisions that we're making. We're not making lending decisions. We may be making decisions to recommend a vehicle, which is trying to help a customer, but still, maybe we need to be concerned about bias and ethics in that context as well. So it's, that's why I think my answer earlier was AI really helps me. It gives me a quick answer. It gives me a starting place. I ingest that. I process that as a human. I pick the parts that I like and the parts that I don't like, and that becomes the product. It's not AI by itself that is the end product. So that's the ethical guidelines. No different than AI, I guess. Just it increases the risk because of the accessibility. There's one other question.
Thank you, Nick.
One other question, Rod, in here. Do you want me to?
Okay, go ahead, Robert. Yeah, go ahead. We have a minute or two left.
Yeah, it's just what AI skills do our students need, was the question. I think what I would want to teach my daughter on it is I would want to teach her, I would want to expose her to it. And I would want to give her like case law, like examples of where it can go right and where it could go wrong in really meaningful ways for her, so it was tangible for her about both the strengths and the risk associated with it. Again, like to me, I think awareness on those things is really the biggest piece. And that's what I would want to arm folks with.
Any closing thoughts from you, Robert?
Nothing worth sharing other than to thank Nick for an amazing amount of information. Unfortunately, I did not capture this so that I could throw it into ChatGPT to spit out all the salient points, but I know it's recorded, so I look forward to doing that later, and I'll have the Cliffs Notes for everybody.
Great. Well, I would like to thank you, Robert, for arranging for Nick to join us today, and also the Commonwealth Learning Partnership. Gina, did you have a closing thought for us?
Just quick closing thoughts. This was fabulous. So Nick, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate. And like Robert, I was taking lots of notes, but I do thank you for presenting AI in a way that invites us to look at ways to seek solutions and engage our students, to not see it as a parallel universe that is going to go away, because it's not. It's here. And so how do we make best use of that to really engage students and really expose them to things that possibly they would have never seen, without it. And thank you everyone for joining us. And I will have to end by saying that with CarMax, again, I am not paid to promote CarMax, but our family bought 12 cars from CarMax over a span of time because we had 6 drivers. So yay, CarMax. But Nick, seriously, thank you so much. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We have many more sessions to come, and you will get a link to the recorded session. So take care and be well. Thank you.